Hello, and welcome to Champion Your Culture, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of leadership and organizational culture. I'm Ryan McCarty.
And I'm George Rogers. Together, we're here to guide you on a journey of personal and professional growth. Every week, we bring you insights, stories, and strategies to help you and your company thrive in today's dynamic world.
So whether you're leading a team, running a business, or just eager to make a positive impact, you are in the right place. Let's jump right into today's show and champion a culture of purpose and passion. Welcome to Champion Your Culture. Yo.
Whoa.
I'm a little mad, man.
Why are you mad?
I'm mad because 3 days ago it was over 70 degrees, and on the way into work this morning, it was snowing.
You know what that means, though?
That we need to move to Florida?
No, we don't need to. So, obviously.
You did that before, though. Move. You moved south. You did this.
I can't move. So, but the promise of me leaving the South to come back home was that anytime I saw white stuff falling from the sky.
Yeah.
And I remember, 3 months ago, your HR craziest, shit in HR story where, somebody was dumping something over the overpass. I don't think what was coming from the sky was the same as that guy that, flunked his background check and drug test. But anytime it snows, we goes.
Yeah.
If it snows, we goes to the South.
Right.
And so I got to go South. I got to go, whether it's, Florida, Texas, I got to go somewhere warm. So it just so happens that next month in August, I'll be going to, I'm going to Austin, Texas.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to Austin, Texas. So
next month in August.
April. I said August.
I was
April.
about to say, I
would love for it to be August. That's my favorite season.
We're really pre-recording our shows now.
Yeah. This is not pre-recorded, it's actually live. So you can ask me any question you want to right now. And we, don't ask me any question. Keep it, PG-13 at least.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I think it's really important to welcome everyone today. So thank you all for joining us today on Champion Your Culture. We're always live every single Monday on LinkedIn, and you can listen to us anytime on Spotify. We need you to follow, like us, subscribe.
Yeah.
All that.
Show us a little bit of support. We're actually trying to get to a certain place on Spotify and our YouTube channels as well. So we're trying to grow those. And we need y'all help. We don't ask for a lot of things. All right, maybe we do, but when we do, we it's because we want it the most.
Matters.
It matters.
We want to be able to inspire other people, and so if you could go on Spotify and give us a follow, and you'll always be updated. We have new guests and new topics every single week, and so it's exciting to be able to come together with you every single week.
Yeah.
Because I'm always learning something. I think when we get together and we talk about culture and leadership, there's always new things that pop up in these convos. And we hear people all the time that have to stop their car on the side of the highway and take notes of different things that they've learned in the process. And so it's like a fun webinar kind of situation.
It's a conversation between two people who genuinely enjoy conversating. Like, one of the things that a lot of people say is that y'all love to talk to each other, and we'll do this a lot, whether it's going downtown and having coffee or here in our office. We will say, man, we need to record this conversation. And it's those conversations that we never record that has some of the best content we write down or try to write down and memorize what we said. And so we like to give a lot of good content away. That's really our hearts. We don't do this. There's no monetary value in this for us. We do appreciate Culture Good for, powering us up and giving us this platform and opportunity in this lovely studio. And then trying to give our viewers people that can bring value as well. We had Dr. Stephen Shepard in a few months ago. We had McCarty in, who won the NBA Foundation during the All-Star Weekend. We also have guest today that I'm really excited about, a good friend of mine that I met. And so I can't wait to bring her on. And then we have Alex Yeater, who's doing great work with Everbowl. He's used to be part of the Round Root family, owned over 30 plus stores within Verizon TCC Wireless Zone. Now he's doing great things in the short-term rental space, but even more bigger things with Everbowl. Partner with Drew Brees, a lot of Indiana folks, especially, our partner, Scott Moorhead from Purdue, graduated from Purdue, Drew Brees, from Purdue.
I think Drew Brees is a lot cooler than Scott.
Yeah.
At least he can throw a ball better.
He definitely can throw a ball. Well, you know what's crazy is that rumor has it, I was listening to a story, he can no longer throw with his right arm.
So
but he still throws a spiral with his left arm.
So Scott might even have a better arm than Drew Brees.
No way. I think Drew Brees' left arm is probably better than Scott's.
Drew Brees' broke right arm is better than all three of ours put together, I would imagine.
I can throw a good ball.
Hey, so this week's exciting though, because we have our 2-day certification. So we have leaders coming in to join us tomorrow and Wednesday. So we're going from like 9 to 3 or 4 o'clock, and all that. Now we wanted to announce for all of you out there that are in the SHRM family, we are now SHRM certified.
12 hours, 2-day training. Get 12 accredited hours for the 2-day training. That's going to help bring value for your workplace. You say, George, what is the ROI? We hear a lot of that in the conversations. This is a lot of money. What's the ROI? And the ROI, number one, starts with, a lot of people don't talk about it, but one of the biggest ROIs in this is retention.
Yeah.
We see the impact that it does. Wiley Meadow, who's bringing 5 or 6 more people, every year to the more he grows and the more he's bringing in. And the reason is he went from 230+% retention all the way down turnover to 16%.
Yeah.
That's a dramatic change in a year.
Yeah.
So within 12 to 16 months, he's going from 230
to 17%.
To 17%.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
And so when you see something that's working, and that's the idea, is that if we say that culture impacts everything, then when we're intentional about it, then it's going to impact everything based on us being intentional, right? And so they're doing that. And now the city of Marion, the industry of manufacturing, is bringing us in to talk to the entire sector of manufacturing throughout the city. And then the potential effort of all businesses in the city. That's my dream and vision from a town I was born and raised in, Little Marion, Indiana, for all the businesses to come together and build a culture of good throughout the city is going to be sick.
Yeah. So very excited about that. So the ROI, retention, engagement goes up. Employees feel more fulfilled. We have a sense of belonging that is created, all while doing, the root of it all is doing good and giving back. And not just doing good to be seen, but doing it
always being seen doing good.
But it's always good to be seen doing good. And so that's the heart really of culture of good, is to be able to allow your employees to bring their soul to work. And in doing so, bringing a culture of good not only to your company, but it's to your community. And the mayor, as you said, of Marion, is saying, hey, we see this drastic impact. What if the city does good together? What if other organizations? So this is exciting. I'm fired up. I'm fired up. So it's not too late. I would say it's not too late, but if you could somehow get to Fishers, Indiana tomorrow and join us, it's not too late for you to sign up, register. You can find more information about that on culturegood.com. But beyond that, I'm excited about getting my friend.
Today's a special day.
It is a special day. A year ago, I had the opportunity to join my friend Ben Eubanks, who gives me a ton of opportunities to either fill in the gap for him, or I can be his shadow along an awesome trip and be able to meet so many, powerful, impactful, inspiring people. People are doing good. People who have a heartbeat like you have. That connection when you just genuinely meet somebody that cares about leadership, that cares not just about corporate, but just about people. Right. And understand that value. I got to meet this young lady, and at first I didn't know if she would like me or not. She just had that look, like it reminded me of my mom, my grandma. Like, she's gonna figure out anything and everything about me before she connects with. Like, she just does her true evaluation. I can see the look in her eyes, trying to figure out who George was. And maybe like day 2.5, I think we had a good lunch together where it was like, it couldn't be a pretty lunch. It was like this big old sloppy burger, and I knew at that moment that she saw me at my finest moment. And I saw her at hers, that we were going to be connected forever.
The good, bad, and ugly burger.
She saw the good and bad and ugly. I mean, it was dripping, stuff was falling off. And I was like, you know what? After a couple of drinks and a good sandwich, I wanted everybody to meet my good friend. So let's welcome her to the stage.
Yay!
My good friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I heard you all talking about the snow. I'll tell you, it's spring in Florida. We went to the beach yesterday. Listen, I am so excited for 80-degree weather. It has lifted my spirit and my mood. I am in a much. So I heard y'all talking about coming to Indianapolis. I can't do it, but
I know I was telling you this morning, I thought you were going to be here live with us in the studio, and I understand why you're not here for sure.
No, I chase the sunshine.
Not only the flight, but it's like, the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why leave sunshine for snow is the question.
Yeah, I heard someone the other day say they moved to Florida because you don't have to shovel sunshine.
Very true. Very true. I remember
Those
a
are
trip I
facts.
went on a few years ago, and we were getting a rental car, and there was this thing, and I was like, "What do you do with this?" And my colleague was like, "You've never seen like an ice scraper?" I was like, "Girl, I'm from Florida. No, I have no frame of reference for whatever this is."
Oh my gosh.
Oh, my.
Yeah. An ice scraper. Yeah. Yeah. I have like 3 in my car.
Yeah. I was saying we got salt in the car. We got
the long
shovels, boots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not an exciting thing of preparation.
Basically, living in Indiana, even with a car and everything else, is like a practice of survival in the winter for sure. Yeah.
You get everything. So we've had, in the course of the last week, we've had 70 plus degree weather. And now we had the summer, we had the spring, fall. Now we're today woke up to winter. The good thing though, as we look outside, is that it's not sticking. So we got southern snow where we should still be shut down because there's a possibility and or thought about it. And in some areas it has flurried, but you know, it's not sticking. So that's a positive. I would be grateful that it's snowing without sticking.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how I like to ask Ryan Kamaria. I'm butchering this name up already. I told Ryan I'm going to call your name 3 different ways before this is all over. And I apologize, but how do you relate snow falling without sticking to workplace leadership and or culture? I like to take weird things like that just on the spot because it creates creativity and anxiety all in one piece. So I'll throw it to Ryan first.
For me?
I'll throw it to Ryan. Maybe you can do culture and Kamaria, you can do leadership.
Yeah.
Snow falling from the ground, but not sticking. It's like culture.
It's like values that are written on the wall, but don't stick on people's hearts.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Kamaria, what you got for us?
It's like leadership training we give people without actually helping them implement what they've learned.
Ooh.
One-off trainings.
One-off trainings.
One-off training.
Those one-off trainings.
Yeah.
Did you like the snacks? The snacks were great.
Yeah.
That's our measure of success.
Yeah,
that's a good topic. Talk a little bit more about that because we always talk about like the difference between training and development. The development is the enablement, right? Where you as a leader empower and get out of the way. And to your point, the implementation, that word implementation is something that I've learned over the last 10 years. That was like when I first started in the culture space, it was like, well, people love people and let's talk about culture. And then it was like, no, we got to actually do something, you know? So talk about that a little bit because your experience is in the HR space, correct?
Yes, and so interestingly enough, I was actually really fortunate that while a lot of times I was anchored in HR, I also would dotted line into operations. And so some of my most interesting jobs was when an operations leader was like, I want my own HR person. Thank you so much. Because I want to make sure that they really get what we do here. And so when they come up with solutions, they're not just throwing things on the wall, they're customizing them to what we need. So I've had the benefit of being both in HR and sort of supporting ops, which has been honestly really nice and really insightful.
Yeah. Yeah, because the functions are different, but they work together.
They do. And so I think the other part of that is everything, and this is, I'm going to have a small soapbox moment. Everything we do in HR is literally for someone else, right? It's for marketing, it's for operations, it's for sales, it's for other people. And so in order for it to stick, we really have to understand like what their day-to-day is like so that when we're creating things that are pragmatic and make sense and don't feel like, oh, it's just some other thing that HR wants us to do. Because I can't tell you the number of times like we've pitched initiatives and things, and I've had HR like literally, I've had operations look me in the face and go, girl, we're not doing that. That's super cute. Good for y'all. We're not doing that. So like you really got to be in there and understand their language, their goals, their objectives, and that helps you to make things that are more pragmatic for them.
Yeah. So you're talking about building a culture with people rather than for people even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then when you think about the enablement, you got to think about that beforehand. You have to think about that in the design of whatever you're doing. Because I used to teach essentials of people management. It was this fun, 2-day course, 8 topics. They had these binders or whatever. And literally I'd find them in the hallway and I'd go, where's your binder? And they'd be like, in the trunk of my car. Because after the event, they never pulled it out again. So thinking about what am I going to get them to do after the fact that's going to pull over what they learned, it's a part of even how we design and how we think about developing people.
Yeah. Is it like how do you do that? So do you, at the end of each workshop or training, do you have like an action plan that's kind of built into it? Or is that part of the IDP process for individuals as part of their development then?
Yeah, so I like to build it into the actual class. So it's a little bit of pre-work on the side of designing for me to go out and say, well, if they were going to do this in real life, like what would that look like? I always say like it's super important to take the guesswork out of being great. And I would say 90% of the reason why people don't transfer what they learn is because we make them figure out how to apply it. So think about it, right? They go to training and we're like, write an action plan. But there's a bazillion different ways that you can implement what you learned. And so then people get decision paralysis. I always say like, there's a book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And they talk about when there's too many decision points, people do absolutely nothing. So when I design a solution, I actually like to go into whatever business line it is that I'm supporting and think and figure out pragmatically and realistically, how would they do this? What would make sense? So I'll go and I'll say, well, what meetings do you have? Or what touch points do you have? Or how many people do you, just asking all those questions so that when I build in their go do it activity, I've already figured out what good looks like for them. And I've given them like, okay, so when you go to your next meeting on so-and-so date, you do so-and-so thing, use this tool, go do it, come back and talk to me. So I'm making that a part of the learning, that leap over, a part of the learning, but I'm also making sure that's a realistic ask of them so that they're like, oh, this is going to help me with that next meeting. I'm already, I always say every action needs a home. So if you can build in the home for that action, you're going to get them to do it.
I like that. We were talking, I don't know if this is a good time to bring this up. I'm bringing it up early. I thought maybe I'll hold on to this, but I feel like this really aligns with kind of a conversation we had a while back. And there's 3 things that really stuck out to that conversation. I would love for you to share with the audience because I think it's impactful. I think there's so much value there. You talk about the will, the skill, and the way. I think I got those in order.
You did. You got them.
And how that aligns. And so as we're talking about, and the culture of a great people leader, what it takes, and everything, I feel like can we talk about this right now and then just kind of let it be what it is, just natural, go off the script, right, a little bit early. Can you break down what this is and then how it's applied? And I will even say, if you want to have a test friend on this situation, Ryan is a coach as well. I would love to see that dynamic of going through this. Go through this whole step of the will, the skill, and the way. Explain it.
I love that. So I'll tell you. So the will, the skill, and the way, it came from, again, working in an organization. People always would come to me when something wasn't working. So they would be like, Kamaria, they won't do the thing. And whatever the thing was, I had to go figure out why our HR or why our people leaders weren't doing the thing. And so what I really distilled in, there's 3 like major reasons why they are not doing the thing. So the will, the skill, and the way. The will is simply they don't have motivation to do whatever it is that you're doing. And that's real, right? Because people leaders are people too. And so it makes sense that sometimes they don't want to. And so within the will, I talk about first and foremost, there's no compelling reason why. So I'm in HR and I'm like, go have this difficult conversation. And as a people leader, I'm like, but why? Yeah. That matters to you. It doesn't really matter to me.
Right.
The second in that group is competing outcomes or competing priorities. And that's literally, again, from an HR perspective, we've been like, go do this. We want you to have these conversations, prioritize training, and whatever it is. But we've not actually talked to the business line about that priority or what we want them to do. And 9 times out of 10, a people leader is going to do what their business line tells them before they do what HR tells them. So if we create competing priorities and we don't create the opportunity for them and we haven't worked that out, they're not motivated to do what we're asking. They're motivated to do what the business line tells them because that's what they're rewarded for. And then the third in there, I call a self-punishing outcome. And that's literally where I've asked you to do something that in some way makes your life harder. And so you're like, no, thank you. And the example I give of that is when we ask people leaders and we're like, oh, listen, we really want you to manage out your bottom performers. And I've had managers say to me, I'm absolutely not doing that, because the last time I did that, the requisition to replace that person was declined. And so I ended up having that person's work, right?
Yeah.
So when I talk about the will and we're designing things, it's really important that we're looking at sort of like motivators, right? So skill is very much, hey, did we train them on the thing? So a project that I worked on before, we wanted to improve our listening capabilities. And so we bought a new tool. It was literally, I think our usage was at 10%. So that was, raging success. But
right.
Using raging success. But one of the reasons why when we looked at like what we trained people on, we trained them on like the tool, but we didn't train them on all the things that go around actually building a listening culture. So there's not the proper training. And then there's no coaching and reinforcement. So even if I'm not doing it right, there's literally no red flag to wave. There's no support system in place. There's no coaching. There's no feedback to tell me that. And then lastly, the way is we've just not created a path. Like it's important for people to know that knowing and doing are not the same thing. And so it could be from a leader perspective, and I'm sure you probably have this happen in your career. We'd be like, we want you to make a decision based on this policy. And I'm like, great, where's the policy? And they're like, oh, well, the policy doesn't exist. Well, that does not help me. It could be that like the tools and technology don't work. So you told me to push the button or do the link and it's not there. It doesn't work. It doesn't look like you told me to. And then lastly, you've just not been really clear about my decision-making capabilities. So we're supposed to do a thing, but you've not told me what my role is in that. You just kind of did a dump and run. So the will and the skill in the way is how I basically go back when they're like, oh, they're not doing the thing. It's how I pinpoint why they're not doing the thing.
I love that. Yeah. Just the statement, the will, the skill, and the way. Because when I first heard it, the first thing that came to mind was when there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
That's not always true. You got to have a skill too.
Yeah.
You can't just want it.
You got to have a talent, to be able to align that.
I love that you said that though, because I find, and maybe I'm an optimist for people leaders, but where there's a will, there's not always a way. And I love talking to people about this because I fundamentally believe that people, like, no one shows up to work and they're like, let me terrorize my team. That would be great. But I do
let me go to work and be miserable.
Yeah, like no, they want to be great. But I think that when we think about how we enable people leaders, and George has heard me talk about like manager enablement over and over and over again, you do have to make sure that you have the right tools and resources. And so like a good example, career development. People are always like, oh, like managers should support people in career development. And I would challenge you and say, do you have a career development framework mapped out?
Right.
Do you have it like do you have a real process you have programs for people into? Because saying that the manager is responsible for career development with no support from the organization, that's kind of crazy.
Isn't it? It just feels like we're missing the mark in the leadership context. And I'm sure you have your own frustrations. George has his. I have mine as well. We work with a lot of companies, a lot of leaders. There's a definite gap that we've identified. I know, George, you have as well with Ben Eubanks, and the difference between where executive leadership sees the culture and where everyone else sees the culture. And there seems to be a lot of blind spots. We talked about that with Dr. Stephen Shepard about a month ago on the show, his idea of blind spots. And there's just so many blind spots in business. And I feel like many times we're not getting better at this.
We are not. And
I need some optimism.
Well, but okay, so we're not, but we can, right? So
yes.
There's a couple things that jump out at me about what you said. One is, I'm trying to think of the phrase that someone used. It was like the view from the view from the sky is not the same as the view from the streets.
Yeah.
And what she meant by that was, so I was working for an organization, and we were sort of mid-end pandemic, and we were trying to figure out, how to decide who had to come back into the office and how to classify and all the good things. And so we went through and we used our HRS system to like flag what percentage, blah, blah, whatever. And so one of my colleagues called me and she's like, hey, have you pushed this button? Have you like checked the link to see how you can? And I was like, no, hold on. So, we get on the phone together and we're like, it doesn't work. So I happened to be in a meeting with our senior leader, our like head of talent management. And I was like, hey, did you click on the link? Because I think you must have had to do it for our group, to tell the people I'm not coming back in the office. And she's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, no, my assistant did that. Don't tell nobody. And I was like, ma'am.
Just press the link.
Just press the link.
Here's the thing, right? A lot of times senior leaders are removed from the actual activities that other people have to do. And so they have a theoretical perspective about what should happen. And I think that's where the breakdown sometimes is it's sort of like, it should work this way in my head. And the gap is we forget to actually bring in our end users to test and verify that it actually works that way. So, my optimism about getting better is sort of evangelizing how important it is for people, leaders, and managers to get their perspective, viewpoint, to have their voice included in things that we are creating for them so that it makes sense and they can tell us, hey, red flag, this thing doesn't work. Because I was like, but it doesn't work. So I think we always just make sure we're giving people the opportunity to do that.
And that literally speaks to the idea of like having a group that does represent everybody within the organization.
Yeah. You got to. I think and we talk about this all the time, and I love your perspective that you share, because when I think about the perspective gap, I always use it in a sense of airplane, right? It's something visual that we've all seen and or been on. Most people have. But when you're on the ground and you're looking up in the sky and you see an airplane, you're thinking, man, that looks small. And vice versa. When you're in the sky, I'm like, man, that is a pretty small town. And it's like, oh, that's Atlanta. And that's also, right, we just passed like, you think of these things as small because of your perspective. When in reality, when you're walking onto, and I believe it was North Carolina, we had to walk outside to get to the plane. And it's different when you're coming down a terminal. You can still realize, hey, this is a pretty big plane. But when you're on the outside and you're having to go up the stairs all the way up to the door, it's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And you realize how big this is versus being on ground level and seeing it above you. And it's like, man, that airplane looks very small. It must be a jet. Only to realize, hey, that seats, you got about 40 rows and each row has 3 people on each side, right? That's a lot of people. You're talking about 200 plus people on something that perspective from your point of view, because you're so low to the ground, looks different. Organizations have to have that step back. And I always use the ladder because it's easy. When we do this in person, I'll have everybody on the floor, and then I'll say, take a step on the ladder and look at something from that view. What else do you see? Then take another step, maybe take 2 steps. What do you see now, right? And as we go higher, our perspective looks a little bit different, and we can see further. We can see details that we couldn't see before. I can't see what's behind the chair that Ryan's sitting on.
Yeah.
But if I had a ladder right here and I was able to climb up, I'll say, oh, not only is there flowers behind you, but it's in a pot. It's not just sitting on the ground. I don't know what it's sitting in from this perspective, but if I am able to elevate myself, my perspective is grander. And I think from development standpoint, I think from a culture standpoint, I think from implementation, from any change, we talk about ACAR and the OCM all the time. When you changing something or implementing something, that perspective is so valuable. And it's important to have not just C-suite levels, as we often do, because it's best for business. You got to have the perspective of what's best for people.
But what's also interesting, you're talking about 2 different things here. You're talking about the issue that we have is leaders never go down to the bottom of the ladder to see that perspective, and then not giving those that are at the bottom of the ladder the opportunity to rise, to see that perspective. To your point, we talk about this idea of motivation, the why. We talk about any change that's happening. within an organization, and it's happening every single day, we should be talking about why that change is happening when there's lack of clarity around that. And so I love that idea of the ladder, but I think it also speaks to not only the leaders gaining the perspective of people, but of leaders being able to give the general population or people the perspective of leadership. This is why this change is happening.
Yeah, it's important.
But a lot of times we don't know why we're making those changes.
Yeah, because it has nothing to do with the people. It's the concept of business in our mind first, and that's usually typically business decisions. It's not like, how does this affect our people? How will this affect our culture? How will this affect our leadership? Are we then, going back to stage one that we were talking about in the beginning, are we training, or has our development, prepared us for this moment? Right. That's a huge difference. And so we talked about that a little bit, Kamaria, and I know that's something that was on your heart as well, is the leadership as the bedrock of organizational culture, and how that is the start of, for me, any type of change when you're trying to have that relationship. Because at the end of the day, communication is important. Clarity, as you said, is important, but it's also important to have that relationship as a leader with that employee. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect from the organizational culture aspect from leadership perspective, Kamaria? Because I think some of the insights that you had on that that you can emphasize on is so important and valuable, and I think some people get some content out of it.
Well, I think the most important thing for me is for our organization to understand that, like, your leadership culture is your culture, right? Because I've been to like a number of conferences, and I'm sure you guys have heard too, where people will sort of talk about like leaders and managers as if they operate outside of or adjacent to the organization culture, and you're sort of like, no, they're one and the same. And I think it was our good friend Ben Eubanks, who, I can't think of like the exact number, I'm like kicking myself that I don't have it, but he shared some research that basically said the way that people feel about like their manager influences how they feel about the organization. So thinking that you can separate one from the other, and the reason why this is so important to me is I remember being at a conference and listening to a very sort of senior leader talk about like our managers, whatever, and I was like, sir, that is your company, that is your culture that you're talking about. So when you think about what your people leaders and why they're super important, because they are the epitome of your culture, and they are connecting those dots to what senior leaders are asking of people to do. And the important part is that, like, all of us, going back to your point, George, all of us go through change very differently. All of us, that like why this change matters or why I'm going to care or how I'm going to receive it is different. And so there is no one size fits all answer. And it's really important to have a leadership culture that knows the people that report to them, so they can connect the dots on the why. Because we talked about the sort of ADKAR, right? And I always love to talk about, that desire, that D in ADKAR is like, what's in it for me? Why should I care? And so for me to talk to my team about a change, I have to be able to say, this is going to be great for you because you're going to get to learn new things. Or the change is going to be great because it's going to give you an opportunity to meet different leaders. It's not always going to be, a cut and dry, because your point is, you're absolutely right, George. Like, the business is doing what is best for the business. But like, we have to almost find that silver lining for people and help connect those dots. So even when you are having a change that's causing people to have to leave the organization, which is not, it's hard to be like, yay for that, because the business wants to save money. But you do have to be able to say, but it's okay, because when one door closes, another one opens, and I've prepared you with the right skills to go out and find an even better opportunity. So I think when you have leaders who can humanize what's happening in the organization, that is probably one of the most important aspects of your organizational culture, because that's where the human connection happens on the team level. So you need to make sure your people leaders are able to bring that to life.
Yeah, I always say that culture is a consequence of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I love that you said you use the term leadership culture, because we always talk about how a leader is one who leads everyone, but a leadership culture is where everyone leads.
Yes.
In this mentality of like having a owner's mentality, but not owning the business, but owning the culture, owning the team, owning your contribution, owning your team's contribution, right? What can we own? What are we motivated by? And then to your point, Kamaria, is like, what's the end result of that? What do I get for contributing meaningfully? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think leadership culture to me is also, it's really important for an organization to establish this is how we do it here.
Yeah.
Because most leadership cultures are the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And like I have some unfortunate news for my HR friends. Like, no one reads your competency models.
Never.
Not gonna hold you. I don't bust it out, and I'm like, oh, okay. On page 7, if I go to this column under middle manager, and this column, like no one reads those.
Mm-mm.
And so, if you want a strong leadership culture,
I was trying to hold it together, but I'm dying of all the, all the lies that companies get. Like it's kind of like the biggest lie in America. I have read and agreed to the terms and conditions. When it comes to HR, that's.
Let me get to my tool. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but you're right? So it's like nobody reads that.
Yeah.
And so like when I say like it's important to establish a leadership culture, I do mean like an organization has to take the time to say, if you're a leader here, this is what good looks like, and this is what we all do. And so if I use a word or a phrase and I say, Ryan, tell me how you shared your vision with your team, or tell me how you celebrate success on your team, you automatically know that I'm asking you, how do you reward and recognize? And if you can't tell me how, then I'm like, you're out of alignment with what our culture, our leadership culture is has agreed are our norms. And I mean, I don't have like a laundry list, but like have 5 or 6 best practices that everyone in your team does, or all your leaders do. I remember working for an organization, and shout out to the Studer Group, because they founded so many of my own principles about how to create a culture of people leaders. But like every leader had to round on their employees, and that term rounding came from being in a hospital doing your rounds. But they were just like, hey, like once a quarter, the expectation is that you round, and not only do you have to do it, you have to feed up what you learned to the person above you. And there's a whole roll up so that we can kind of capture what's happening in the organization. So there's consistency in behavior in what our people leaders are doing. And there's a structure and process in place that supports the ask that we have. So like when I think about leadership culture, I don't like, people always, we have one. But when you start like sleuthing and pulling, no, you don't. You just have a bunch of leaders. Good luck to you,
Yeah. And that Wild Wild West creates all those microcultures.
That's right.
Because I hear that all the time. It's like, yeah, my team is really connected, but everybody else isn't. And I'm like, that's not a culture.
Yeah.
That just sounds like a big mess.
Yeah. Because people get loose with the word culture. They do, right? And so like culture means we have shared practices, we have shared language, we have shared artifacts. And so like back in the day, I used to do orientation at a hospital like every 2 weeks like clockwork. And one of the main activities I would do is like a what we say, what we do, right? And so I would start off by being like, what does culture mean to you, right? And when you think about it, it's like, I'll say, how do you know you're in Italy? And they'll be like, oh, because of the food, because of the language, now, how do you know you're at our organization? And if people can't point to those hallmarks, then you don't have a culture. You have a hodgepodge of, a tapestry of things.
Yes.
And so when I say your leadership culture, if you whip out that competency model, I'm going to go, that's a hodgepodge of things. No, thank you. But what are you holding all of your leaders accountable for? What do they say? What do they do? And that's the important part about building culture for me.
That word accountability is like the A and the ABCs, yo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, if you're not holding leaders accountable, then how are the leaders holding their team members accountable? And then the business isn't accountable. So it really is starting with that leadership accountability.
Yeah. I always say, words that come here, you were talking about that psychological definition of belonging. Where there's no accountability, there can be no belonging.
Right.
Right. You may get some engagement based on whatever you may be trying to do because, hey, that fits my gift or my talent or something I'm connected to. But for me to have a sense of belonging, my manager, my leader has to really respect, appreciate, right, and accept me. for who I am. Those are the three principles for who you are, why you are, what you are, right? Not for what I can do for the business, but you accept George as he is, right? Prior to your development and or one-day training, George is George, and I accept you for who you are, is what you're saying. For me to have a sense of belonging, but you can't have that without accountability. And so when people say, hey, we want to create a community, and that god awful word that I have a disdain for in business now, family, right?
We are not family.
No.
It's like,
now, George and I are kind of family.
We're kind of family, but
we've known each other for 30 years.
Sometimes you treat people like that uncle, their cousin that you can't stand. Like sometimes that is family in the business. Like I can, if like your family treats you that way, I definitely don't want to be a part of that. Like I've gotten rid of some family members that are actually family, because like there's a certain way you're going to talk to me. You will respect, appreciate, and accept me. And if not, I'm not belonging.
Yeah.
We can have the last name all we want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But unless you hit the holler, I ain't calling you. No. But in all seriousness, that accountability piece is the root, in my opinion, is the root and the key to a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. You cannot say something growing up, and I think Kamaria, you probably heard this too. Do as I say, not as I do. Right. That whole phrase that mom and them used to always say. I don't care what I do. This is what I'm saying, and it's that. I understand what you're saying, but I can't respect you or what you're saying, because what you do is not is in conflict with your words. It doesn't line up. And that goes back to, hey, these are our core values. You know, in our business, we call them 5 promises. These are our 5 promises that we promise to do. And everything that we say, everything that we do aligns with these 5 promises. But companies with core values that are not accountable to those core values, it just kind of dripples down.
Yeah.
Accountability is the key to that.
So I'm gonna throw a question into this conversation that I have rolling over in my head for the last few years that I still can't figure out the answer to.
Okay.
So when we think about culture and leadership, I get asked all the time, and I have a quick, easy answer to this, but I want to hear you guys. What do you do when you're in a culture, maybe it's not toxic, but it's not benefiting your well-being, it's not, you don't feel a sense of belonging? What do you do with that? I mean, even HR leaders that are like, I want something for this company, but the leadership just doesn't give a shit. I mean, you've heard that before. It's like, I want this so bad.
Yeah.
I want this culture of good and bring your soul to work. I get it, but I know my boss won't.
Yeah.
Kamaria, I'm gonna let you have this first.
I love that. He was like, take it away, Kamaria. So you know what? I'll tell you this much. One of the things, and I used to struggle with this early in my career, the whole like make a business case, because I would be like, if you have to make a business case for treating people right, you've already missed the point.
Yes.
However, I think what I've learned, the way I've rephrased that in my mind, is to speak the language of the person I want to influence. And so I always shout out, Larry Appel, who was a COO I used to work for at Winn-Dixie, and was really pivotal in my own sort of development and career, because he would send me out to talk to the store directors and the district managers about, again, this HR stuff. And he'd be like, listen, Kamaria, they sell peas and carrots. All right. So like, don't come in with your fluffy woo-woo situation, like figure out what's important to them and like help them see. Right. And I think what I learned how to do was align what I needed and wanted them to do to something that made sense for them in the language that they spoke. Because again, I'm a hugger, right? I speak in language and emotions and flowers and colors, but a lot of the people I support absolutely do not. Yep. So what I had to learn how to do was basically say, hey, it looks like you have a broken whatever this is. Let me tell you how the thing I'm asking you to do helps you with that broken thing that you do care about. So being able to say, like, I know you care about outcomes. I know you care about results and ROIs and all the fun, good, results things. But all of those results things go through these things that you think are fuzzy. And being able to translate, I liken myself to being a translator, being able to basically help them understand that if you say to me that you are missing your sales targets or that you are not meeting goals and objectives, I can pinpoint you right back to going back to that will skill way. I can pinpoint to where your things are falling down in a way that they understand. So I think the biggest gap is they just think it's a nice to have. It's not an imperative. It's, oh, we want, leaders who can do blah, 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 whatever, but it's okay if they don't. But then when you're like, well, let's look at your turnover, right? You can't meet your production goals because you can't keep people.
Right.
Because you don't have great leaders. Now it's a different conversation for them than you should do it just because you should do it. So I think learning to speak their language, learning to align, and a lot of times what I do with them, so again, I love that you love the will, the skill, and the way, because that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
First thing I do with them is I ask them, what are people doing that you want them to stop doing? Or what are they not doing that you want them to be able to do? And so when they talk through what that is, and then I ask them, why does that matter to you? Like, why do you care? And they'll be like, oh, because we're losing market share, or we are, whatever. We can't. Okay, so now let's talk about how the thing that I want you to do helps you with the thing you want to do. And once we have that meeting of minds, and I tend to get better buy-in from them.
Such good stuff.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Because it's really, you're essentially selling the idea. Right. I mean, the buy-in. So you're trying to get someone to buy the idea from you of that this really does matter. But to your point, you're taking that leader above you through the ADKAR process in a sense, and raising desire at the very beginning.
Absolutely.
It's like, here's why this matters to you.
Yeah.
And speaking their language. I love that. That's so good, because it's like, I am a very touchy, feely, huggy, colors. I want to be home right now painting, to be honest with you. I do not want to be at work. I want to be doing some artsy stuff. I am artsy fartsy.
Yeah.
And it's like, when I'm talking to leaders, when I talk to Scott, our business partner, to your point, he doesn't talk about employee engagement ever. He said, I don't want engaged employees. I want effective employees. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, I love that, because again, George knows employee engagement is my jam.
Yeah.
The way that I talk to people about employee engagement is I start off and I go, what does George look like when he's highly engaged? So, and I'm gonna actually ask you, Ryan, because you know George really well. So when George is at his best, when he is highly engaged, what does that look like? What do you get out of George?
Paint the picture.
Well, right at the very beginning, what you saw on his face is a smile. I know that when George is engaged, I can see it on his face. And I've been around him long enough to know, just by his body language, whether he's like actively engaged in what's going on or not. He also gets very intense and serious, though. So I can see it on his face, but I also know that he's taking breaks to breathe. And when he's breathing, and he's taking those breaths and he's caring for himself, I can tell that he's highly engaged as well. George is an interesting one, because when he's engaged, he's not very vocal. So I know George is a unique person, because the more engaged he is, the quieter he is.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's like allowing even in conversations, he's absorbing it.
Okay.
He's listening, he's figuring things out, he's writing. Like, when I'm watching George and he's engaged, he's doing less talking and he's thinking. He goes into it, he goes internal.
Tell me about his work. So when he is highly engaged and he's doing work, what does that look like?
When he's highly engaged and he's doing work. Well, I haven't ever seen him that way. I'm kidding.
George works.
I'm trying to. This is a good practice. I don't want to just throw an answer out there.
Yeah.
A little bit. Well, he's definitely on it when he's. And I say that almost like he steps up into a level of authority. Sometimes I feel like when he's in a larger group, he's really quiet, but I see that as he's doing work more one-on-one. Again, when I see him actively doing work, I don't hear him.
Okay.
He's quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How does that benefit the work that you guys do together?
I talk a lot. So, and so when we're in conversations and all of that, he's thinking on a deeper level than myself, because I'm giving quick answers. He uses a lot of what is it? Third level listening. Right? Or like the level of listening that's active listening.
Yeah, deeply.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that deeper sense of listening. So yeah, I think he brings that to the table. So how it benefits us and benefits culture of good, that when we're meeting with an organization, he's quiet and he's listening, he's hearing the problems, he's listening to the language of those that are talking. I'm just rambling answers back and forth. And then toward the very end, everybody's like, George, you have anything to offer? I'm just listening. I'm just listening. But he always brings something at the end of conversations that brings a different perspective or something that wasn't said, because he's in it, but he's intentional about how he's communicating and what he's saying, and so yeah, that's George to me, and it really benefits the company that way.
Okay. Would you like more of that or less of that?
More of him being quiet. See, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
More of that thoughtful
Obviously, definitely more of that.
Quality, right?
Yeah.
More. And so, like, that's how I talk to leaders about engagement. First
Yeah.
and foremost, I ask them, what does it look like when someone on your team is highly engaged? Because I want to challenge whether or not they even know. So, like, with me, if someone says, like, what does the high engagement Kamaria look like? You're going to get creativity. You're going to get probably whatever you asked me for, you're going to get more than that, right? You're going to get, like, I asked her for like a circle and she came back with a whole light up sphere. It's crazy. Right? You're going to get like engaged customers and stakeholders. You're going to get high level problem solving. So if you know, like, this is what high engagement Kamaria looks like, and this is how it benefits my team. So when Kamaria is disengaged, she's going to give you what you already have, right? She's going to give you the status quo. You're not getting original content when she's unhappy. And it's okay for a people leader to know that, but then you have to say to yourself, do I want more of creativity? Do I want more of her giving me more than I asked for? So I want people to think of like engagement as energy. And when I talk to leaders about, do you even know what high engagement looks like for your people? Then they're like, oh, actually, I do want more high engagement, because so-and-so, again, will give me creativity. She'll give me problem solving. She'll give me, I as an activity with my teams, I always give them a passion project, because I'm just like, I want you excited about your own development. I want you to do something that's going to make you super happy. And so I had someone on my team who I didn't even know she could code, right? I was like, go off and do you, sis.
Yeah.
And we used to create these workspaces as part of our LMS, where like a group would be like, oh, we want a workspace. That's how they basically arrange their learning and create maps and whatever. And so she came back to me and she literally was like, I coded a workspace builder for us. So essentially, like, we don't have to do this for our team and for our clients anymore. We can basically be like, it's self-service. Here's how you do it. And I can teach them. And I was like, girl, go off. Right? Like, her high engagement behavior gave me something that I didn't even know she could do or even ask for. So when I think about how I talk about people from engagement, it's again back to we're huggers, right? So we want to talk about it from like the fluffy perspective, business leaders, and I'm like, okay, well, tell me what does it look like when someone on your team's engaged? And I make them pinpoint it. First, if they can't tell me what it is, I'm like, sirs and ma'ams, let's get better. But second of all, I'm like, let's talk about how we get more of what you just said they give you in your team. Let's think about how the conditions that'll help you to get there, because you just told me you wanted more of that and how it would help your team. So walking them through it.
Yeah, even as you're talking, and more stuff comes up in my mind about George, right? So when you were talking about yourself with creativity, and then I think about with George, when he's engaged, other companies and businesses are engaged, right? So he's always talking about, I met this person. He's like a network freak, right? I don't like to network. I get into a networking thing. George is like, well, you're really good at this. And I'm like, yeah, but I hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like being in groups of people. I don't like small talk. I don't like meeting I know enough people. I my wife and 2 daughters. George is growing his connections every single day when he's engaged.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so when you can help people, and so like when I talk to people about engagement and managers about engagement, I try to defluffy it for them.
Yeah.
And make it something tangible. Like, I spent quite a bit of time working in tech, and my tech leaders are not fuzzy people. They are ones and zeros.
Right.
So again, going back to that translation, I got to translate all of my like rainbow unicorn pixie dust language to like ones and zeros and make it accessible for them. And then they're like, oh, I get it. So I think, part of the reason why people do dismiss a lot of things that we feel are really important is because it's just not in their language. Like the fluffiness of it, I think drives them away. When we can kind of just be like, no, friend, this is for you too. Then we can bring them along.
This is so good.
Yeah.
I think about the language that leaders need to translate for their employees and speak the language of people.
Yes.
Just the language of executive leadership.
And the language is diverse as well, right? Because the language is a diverse language because we all three speak a different language. Right. And it can be the same language, but we interpret it different, right? I always tell the story whenever I'm talking, and I share this at the last engagement that I had with a person on the cruise. I said I was very fluent in English, but it was Ebonic English. Right. Where I grew, like my sentences were complete based on 3 or 4 words. I didn't need 10 words to make a complete sentence.
Right.
Like I was just like short, and they're like, and I was always like told George, why are you so short with people? It's not that I was short. I was just very fluent and getting straight to the point on what I needed to say and how I say it and be done with it. Right. Yeah. Growing up, that was the way. So now today, like as I'm hearing you talk about my networking, there's a part of me that I have to, so for you can get like getting Ryan to a networking event. It's easy. Keeping them there is a difficult
the hard part.
Right? And it's opposite for me. Getting me there is difficult, but once I'm there,
I can't get him.
You can't get me to leave.
I'm like, can we go get a drink or?
So it's like speaking that language, like, and then how does that person interpret the language? And I think, Kamaria, what you do so well on that engagement piece and connecting is the connectability. How do I connect the things that I'm communicating to Ryan and George so that we can both get to the same place that we all desire to be as people and then as an organization, right? It's that language and then that desire to say, all right, this is how you may interpret it. This is how you may interpret it. This is how we're going to get to where we want to be. It's the whole, we talk about leadership begins with self-leadership, but it's truly what we believe in those 4 steps. Who are you? Facing the identity, categorizing what's the identity of, what you want, who you are, and then where you're going. And when you finally get to that place, who do you want to be when you get there, right? Mm-hmm. As an individual, as a company. Yeah. And it's all about speaking the language. I appreciate you sharing that because that's so powerful to think about those simple steps. And then everybody, what I love about CEOs and executives, they don't like to take your idea, but if you can get them to take your idea, but they say it first, they love it because it's their idea. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And they don't want to put their business on the shoulders of somebody else. But if they can come up with, and I think, Kamaria, you being able to use those words to say, hey, this is what you really want, but I'm going to make you say it so you feel good about
what I do. Listen, let me tell you something. Yeah. I have a whole template. I share screens. I write it down because I want you to see the words as you're putting them down there. And it's so interesting because they do get very reflective when you're like, is this what you meant? Is this what you want? And it works really well because it's not you telling them, right? It's literally you pulling it out of them. But once they tell you like, oh, this matters to me because I don't want, to lose market share, or I don't want to miss this goal. Again, you're not selling, you're almost just taking a consultative approach and helping them solve a problem. And I think that, going back to what you were saying, Ryan, when they see you as someone who's going to help them solve a problem, then you're not having to like, try really hard for their buy-in. And I think that from an HR perspective is a gap in a space where we have to get a little bit better in being able to communicate how we're helping them solve a problem and feeling like we're on their side versus sort of lobbing something over the fence at them and connecting those dots, because a lot of our processes, I think about performance management and the resistance to the performance management process. I don't know that it's really helping anyone solve a problem.
Yeah.
As much as it's just something now that we just do because. So to the extent that we can say, how am I helping the business solve XYZ problem? I think from an HR perspective, we gain credibility, but then we don't have to solve. I mean, when I was performance consulting internally, I'll be honest, I was very popular because I was here for, listen, I'm coming to bring you a solution. Like, you tell me what the problem is, I'm going to figure out why it exists. I'm going to bring you a solution. Everybody's happy. So, I think getting to that place of being able to be like problem solvers through what we do, and helping people understand how culture, like, it is a solution. Like, they may not see that, but to the extent that we can help them realize that improving your culture, it's not an HR thing. It is going to help you to reach those actual business objectives that you've set.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening right now, before you share your contact and stuff, if someone's listening and saying, I need to bring her into the business, what are the things that you do as you engage with businesses? And are you open to more business?
I mean, who's not open to more business?
Okay, perfect. I was hoping that was the right question.
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. So I do 3 key things. First and foremost, I help you establish what your culture, your people leader culture should be. And again, we'll go from Wild Wild West to align, engage, effective, and to really be purposeful about what you're holding people accountable to. And then I support the teaching, coaching, and training to those behaviors. So if you're like, we have nothing, or we're starting over, and we want to be really deliberate about building it right the first time and aligning our training to the outcomes, call me. The second thing I do is, again, when you find yourself saying they won't do the thing, whatever the thing is, I help performance consult around that and do experience design to help bridge the gap there. So if you've recently bought that LMS or that listening platform and you find yourself at 10% because no one's using it, again, call me. And then lastly, if you find yourself getting ready to go through change and you're thinking about how you engage your people leaders, because maybe you acknowledge that all of your changes thrive or die in the hands of people leaders, then I would love to help organizations think through how they can better involve their people leaders in the change beforehand and get them to be champions of whatever that change is instead of a bottleneck.
Awesome. And so 2 questions. We want to get, make sure you share where people can connect with you, but I want to ask one last question. Something that's always dear. And if there's one thing in your heart right now that you would like to share to the audience, that's been there, that's something that you're focused on for 2024. We're already in March, so we got 9 months left, or 8.5, however you look at it. What's something that's on your heart that you'd like to get out there into the world in 2024?
Such an interesting question. Just philosophically, or
personally, like, what is a desire of yours? What's the awareness? We can use ACR. If you were to change the world and do the change that you're called to do, right? The impact that you're going to make amongst the people that you're going to see. What does that impact look? What is that desire that's on your heart that you want everybody to connect with you? Like George did a year ago, and somehow I'm still connected. I won't let you go. I text, I call, I'll reach out, email.
You do. We stay connected.
Because that heart, I mean, there was something about your heart that you share there. And that will skill way just stuck with me as well.
Yes.
There were so many other things, but so last year that was something that connected me. If there was something on your heart that you want to connect with people moving forward, what is that thing?
You know what? I think for me, what I'm probably going to continue, because right now I feel like I'm one of the lone voices on LinkedIn who is saying this. Managers are friends, not foes. I do believe. Well, actually, let me hop back on my soapbox, because now I've thought of the thing. Here we go. Manager is not a dirty word. Okay. I think sometimes when we're on LinkedIn, we're like, managers do this and leaders do that. And I want to be really, I want people to really understand that managers are leaders. Your favorite leader is probably a manager. They're one and the same. If you're boxed above somebody else's box, you are a manager, and that's okay. It's something to be proud of. And I think I personally have been very proud of the teams that I have led. I have been very proud of my work and impacting other people's lives. And so I am proud to say, like, I am a manager. And that's frontline, middle manager, everyone up to the CEO whose box is above somebody else's box is technically a manager.
Yep.
And so to the extent that we can create better people leaders, we can support them in the work that they're doing, it really can help an organization be better. So I think I want people to know that train, blame, and shame is not a development strategy. That you
We got another hour going on that one right there. Train, blame, and shame.
That's a podcast coming up soon, ladies and gentlemen. Coming in.
Coming to a podcast review. Train, blame, and shame is not a development strategy. And if we really want people leaders, better people leaders, that we do have to support them in their efforts. We have to make sure that they have the things that they need, the proper training, coaching, pathways. And to the extent that we make it better for them, we make it better for the entire organization. So that's what we heard this year.
I appreciate that. And then where can people connect with you? If they want to connect with you online, social media, website, you want to share some of that information as well?
Absolutely. Like everybody else, I'm on LinkedIn. There's only 3 of us. So if you're looking for Kamaria Scott, I'm the one that does teaching, coaching, training your people leaders. So find me there. You can also find me at my website, Enetic, ENETIC, LPS.com. So you can, pop in there. You can see me an email at Kamaria@EneticLPS.com. I love to hear from people. But yeah, I'm most responsive on LinkedIn because we're just there all day long. But yeah, definitely send me a note or send me an email. We'll set up some time. If you have something to discuss, we'll do a discovery call and see what we can do.
That's awesome. If you're watching on one of the social sites, you'll be able to find Kamaria's contact info in the comments. If you're listening, I think on Spotify, you can also check it out there.
Yep, we appreciate it. Kamaria, my friend, I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. I've been waiting. We've been talking about this for a while.
I know.
And, I'm just so glad that we had it. We need to do it often, maybe. It'd be good to have you back because we're going to take that blame and shame.
Oh yeah, we need to schedule that for like 6 months from now. We'll have you every 6 months.
Yeah,
I love it.
This was amazing.
I'm open to being a friend of the family, so you invite me back whenever you'd like.
We appreciate it. Appreciate it. Awesome. Well,
thank you, Kamaria. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And as we say every week, we'll see you back here next week on. Actually, we'll say this all together. We're going to say champion your culture together. Okay, Kamaria? Okay.
Oh, because I have to tell you, I loved when I heard the intro. Y'all said it together, and I was like, "Look at them being in unison." Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, we're going to do it. All right. So we'll see you back here next week on Champion
Your Culture.
Your Culture.
Your culture. Slow. Okay.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you back. We'll see you back next week. Thank you for tuning in to Champion Your Culture. We hope today's episode has sparked new ideas and inspiration for your journey in leadership and cultural development.
Building a culture good is a collective effort. If you found value in conversations today, please subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on your favorite platform and share this episode with your friends and colleagues.
Your support helps us reach more people and spread the message of impactful leadership and positive cultural change. Don't forget to visit cultureofgood.com to explore how you can become a certified culture champion.
Every week, we're here to bring you insights and strategies that matter. So join us again for more empowering discussions. Let's continue to champion a culture of purpose and passion together.
Until next time, keep leading with heart and let's make a positive difference in the world. And we'll see you next week on Champion Your Culture.